Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 1 of the Outside Within podcast. My name's Waco Ware. I'm going to be y'all's host. And basically, the whole idea of this podcast is just, it's just me talking to interesting people throughout the outdoor world. That's pretty much it, And I won't spend a whole lot of time on myself. I'm just a guy who lives in Texas. I've always loved to hunt and fish, and that's pretty much it. I'm not a professional hunter, fisher, angler, or anything like that. I'm just a regular guy, so I'm not going to bore y'all with a big, long introduction about me. A little bit more about this show. It doesn't have time limits. If a conversation's going well, we might go an hour, might go 2. We might go 30 minutes. We might go 45. And there's really no set guest list either. I might talk to a commercial fisherman one day and maybe a professional snowboarder the next. I don't know. Hopefully I'll be able to get kind of a range of guests that not only do I find interesting, but hopefully other people will as well. So that's kind of the whole concept behind the show. It's just conversations, really. But episode number 1, I'm going to be talking with Shane Davies. Shane is the owner and founder of River Run Guide Service, which specializes in guiding people or groups of people down Texas rivers in kayaks or canoes in search of trophy largemouth, smallmouth, stripers, or pretty much anything else that's out there that will take a hook. Shane has over 30 years experience on Texas rivers and is a wealth of knowledge as well as a really good guy. So I hope y'all enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Just in advance, I wanted to apologize a little bit about the quality. Originally we wanted to do this face-to-face, but Shane lives 7 hours away from here, so 14 hours of drive time to go do this. I figured there'd be a better way, which over the phone was a lot easier, just a little bit lower quality. We end up talking over each other a little bit. It's not like when you're sitting face-to-face that you can cue off of each other and play off each other's gestures and signs, and so we end up talking over each other a little bit, but that's just the nature of a over the phone interview, and I don't think it's really that big a deal. But also there's a little bit of confusion probably. He calls me both Joe and Waco, which is, he knows me by both. My first name's Joe, my middle name's Waco. I've always gone by Waco, but Joe's just a little bit more formal. It's what I put on any type of documents or anything I have to fill out, so he knows me by both. But if any of y'all are confused about who's this Joe guy he keeps talking about, that's the reason why. Because, like I say, he knows me by both my names. But hope y'all enjoy this show. It's a little bit long, but it's packed full of good information. And hope y'all enjoy it.
The Outside Within podcast.
The Outside Within podcast.
All right, I'm here with Shane Davies, and like I've already told him a few times, I really appreciate him being here. I've been looking forward to talking to him. Couldn't ask for a better guest for this podcast. He's one of the guys who's a founder in kayak fishing rivers around the state, and it's just been really looking forward to talking to him. How's it going, Shane?
Good. I appreciate the opportunity, Waco. Thanks for having me on, man. Glad to be here.
It's my pleasure, man. So let's get started. Just tell us a little bit about your history, man. How did the whole kayak river fishing thing? Where did you pick up this idea? How did it all get started?
Well, rivers are really in my blood. I'm most at home on a river when I'm on a river, and that started at a young age. I was born and raised in the Northwest. Moved to Texas when I was about 10, but before that, all my time, I've said before, a lot of my time was spent at 10,000 feet or better before the age of 10. And a lot of that's true. Outdoors, backpacking, the love of rivers was introduced to me by my parents in the Pacific Northwest. My uncle was a bona fide river rat up on the Skycomish River, and actually lived in a little log cabin up there. And Jeff Singer, and he taught me a lot about rivers. My father too. They both introduced me. We spent a lot of time chasing salmon, trout, and steelhead on rivers in the Northwest. So that's kind of how I got my love and passion for rivers. And wound up in Texas after the age of 10. And when you got a lot of impoundments. I didn't know what an impoundment was. Sounds intimidating. But I soon found out and began my quest for a clean, clear, flowing river, and came upon the Brazos back in the late 80s and early 90s, and really really thus began my passion for river fishing in Texas. And it really started on the Brazos at a very young age, although I can think about times when I think about back in the day when we first moved to Texas. I think really one of my first experiences, now that I think about it, was on the Colorado River, right there in front of the Holiday Inn, where 35 crosses. I couldn't believe it. I walked down, and the river was so clear, and I actually threw a night crawler. Of course, I was ate up with fishing, and my parents were there on business, staying at the Holiday Inn, I think it was at the time. May still be down there, right where 35 crosses Colorado. And literally sight-casted a night crawler to a channel cat. And that may have really been one of my very first encounters with river fish in Texas. And needless to say, literally and figuratively, I was hooked from that point on. But the finer points of the sport and the river fishing and whatnot were really, my teeth were really cut on the Brazos. But I have a passion for Texas rivers, and it's really cool that I've had the option and privilege of sharing that with you. And it's amazing what Texas people just don't understand. It's amazing to me, and I hope it does stay under wraps. I wish it does, but with kayaks and sport and everything taking the popularity, more waters are more accessible than ever. So a lot of people are knowing what some of us have already known for a very long time, that there's some really great water to be accessed in Texas, especially when it comes to rivers. And that's really my specialty and passion.
Absolutely. We are really fortunate. But, did you start off with canoes or boats? How did John boats?
I really didn't do it. It's crazy. I know it was actually the most, I was an ecological nightmare from the get-go. I actually started roaring up and down the Brazos back in 94. I actually applied for my guide license after some tenureship on the Brazos and whatever, and learning that the striped bass was the big fishery back in the day then, and actually was using an airboat, and a 16x8 Panther airboat that had been designed in Florida, and I had a big block 454 GM Marine engine in it. And we just blew up and down that river, and I was running back and forth over fish and all kinds of stuff, scaring off wildlife and lots of things. It's it is good for covering water, but one thing it's not is for reading water, and it was kind of the antithesis of what I'd grown up doing on the rivers I'd grown up on. Everything from wade fishing to drift boats and canoes and whatnot. So I'd kind of it was
still a lot of that going on. I remember when I was on the below Whitney with you, those guys came roaring past us. That was actually something.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. You know what? And those are people exercising their right on Texas waterways.
Uh-huh.
Those rights have been challenged on several different times, but those rights still exist up and down the Brazos, and so we all share it. And quite honestly, it's funny. Back in the day, there were times an airboat would blow through, and you'd want to under your breath curse a little bit and everything. But now and then I've kind of learned to sit back, and kayak fishing will make you sit there 5 or 10 minutes later, and that little wash that they send up in there can sometimes that'll sometimes liven up a run. So
bait
it's all about Yeah, it's all about reading water and taking advantage of situations, man-made or otherwise. The fish are the same way. They're there. They've got to deal with it.
Yeah.
On most of the rivers, it's not like the lake. They don't have a choice. Most of our rivers are shallow and whatnot. They don't have a choice like in the lake where they get spooked and go off and suspend in 30 foot of water. They're there. And a lot of times they'll take advantage of a situation like that. And for the savvy angler, they can sit around and make the proper presentation. Sometimes you can wind up with, maybe, a stretch of your, a best portion of your day spent, just after, one or two of those boats go through. Now, when they go through in droves and they do, and truthfully, I've seen some of those guys, I know there was an event, and I kind of keep an ear to the ground, and these guys were taking veterans, for Heroes on the Water and taking them up and down the river and stuff. And that's fine. The river's for everybody, and there's nothing better than, anything. Hey, man, it's hats off when it comes to our vets, anything we can do for them. And, we make our way, and, I'm all about that. And, I donate plenty of my time and effort to that as well. So in the end, we've all got to make room for each other, and we can all get along at the end of the day. And there's no sense in anybody getting sideways with anybody. And I sometimes I need to listen to my own words better than anybody. But anyway, I won't need to say any more about that.
Yeah. Well, with the population boom in Texas and the popularity of kayak fishing and more, like you say, more access to the rivers and just more people in general, we do,
Absolutely.
We kind of got to get together on this thing and everybody's trying to do the same thing, enjoy the river. So,
right.
So.
Absolutely, man. You can get on board or get it run over because it's bigger than any one of us.
Exactly.
And that's the reality of it.
So how's the guide service going, man? Let's talk a little bit about that. What are some of the, how many people can you take? How long of stretches? How many days, nights? What's going on with that? Talk to us about it.
That's the great thing about it. When you talk about rivers in Texas, you've got private access, you've got public access, as time goes on, there's more of both coming available, so access went out. Of course, that gives you new water. I like, of course, as being a guide, private access is my biggest interest, and I'm excited about that on several of the rivers that I operate on. I've got there's great things coming up on the Devils. National park I've got my national park certification as of last April. So that's given me some latitude there, and hoping to get some things going with the Parks and Wildlife coming up this year, and also working on Parks and Wildlife managed lands, and have been for a number of years on the Brazos. So the Parks and Wildlife, kudos to them for getting accessible lands and making them accessible to anglers and guides, and allowing people to experience these waters because of the growth of the sport. Like I said, I think they seem like it's bigger than any of us can contain. So you either get on board, and there's opportunity for everybody there, and I'm excited about that. I've got trips, I do day trips, where I take beginners, angler, and experts alike. A lot of people are looking to get into the sport before they invest. They're looking at just doing a day trip. I do a lot of that on the Brazos. I do 2 and 3 night trips on the Brazos that cover a little more distance. You're looking, probably going to be somewhere, an 8 to 15 mile range. Of course, I custom tailor all my trips to meet my client's needs, based on, who's in attendance and whatnot. And of course, having private and public access on these various rivers in Texas allows me to do that. Otherwise, you don't want to get anybody into anything that they're not comfortable with. So I'm trying to be sensitive to that. I want it to be a good experience, knowing that, especially if that's your first experience, you want it to be a good one. It's going to be their first taste of the sport. So actually, I probably feel more pressure than that than I do with an expert. I'm going to flow, like with you, Waco, we flow and we go, and, we're going to find our fish. And it's like a two-headed dragon.
Yeah.
It's not always that way, and that's fine. But I love it. That's that's what it is about people getting into the sport. And knowing that this is some of the, the first experiences these people have, not only in kayaks, but in river fishing and whatnot. And we actually encounter, it's not unusual for beginners to encounter some pretty incredible fish more often than not. I've got a saying, watch out for the slow stick. That person that seems like they're, slinging lures in the trees, that's somebody I'm probably going to get a little more attention to than the other people in the party. So watch out for them. By the end of the trip, they might just come back with a vengeance. So, we watch out for the slow stick. At the end of the day, they might be taking everybody's money on big fish. But, yeah. So, that's it. Go ahead.
Some of these rivers are pretty intimidating, man, and it's good that you're out there. Like when I first started to look into the Devil's River, I'd heard all the hype about, how harsh it is and remote and this and that. And so I started looking into maybe I should take somebody out there who knew what was going on, who's been there and done that. And that's how I came across you. And also,
right on.
Yeah, Pecos, man. I was wanting to talk to you about that. I've been really wanting to do that river, but I don't want to do it by myself or with, one of my buddies who's never been out there either. Those are
right on.
Those are pretty. Those rivers don't mess around, and I want to be out there with somebody who's got some experience, at least the first run. So that's a
right on.
Man. That's why I'm glad you're out there. You're a perfect guy for it, especially when it comes to the Devils. Your name is anonymous for it. I mean, it's synonymous. It just comes right up. You look online. Shane Davies is the man, and for good reason, man. You've earned your stripes out there. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate that, Joe. I'm glad you've had the opportunity and privilege to experience it firsthand.
Oh, I have, man. It was awesome. That place is amazing, especially when you don't have to worry too much about things because you got somebody there who's been there and done that. So.
Right on, yeah. When you just can worry on about enjoying the experience, and concentrating on the fish. When you can focus on the fish, it's amazing what you can get done.
Yeah.
So I think, the Pecos is amazing. A quick note on that you bring it up. That's really, from the standpoint, that's a whole different experience. The topography, even though those rivers are just, geographically a short distance apart. If you look at this, less than 100 miles. Topography-wise, I mean, the canyon walls are much more sheer. There's boulders as big as houses in the middle of the river.
Yeah.
It's very much different, and and I got to tell you, it's got well, I would say it's not the smallmouth fishery that the Devils is, nothing like it, really. I mean, I've been on some pretty amazing I've been on an amazing frog bite on that river in the back of some of those arms. In the back of Dead Man's and whatnot, and I'll tell you what, it is amazing. It is the only place that I know that you can legally, you can paddle up and down that river if you know where those ceremonial shaman and habitation caves in that they have. I mean, you can literally ditch your kayaks and just hike up in there, and I mean, you're literally looking at 4,000 to 10,000 year old Indian rock art that's perfectly preserved. And I'll tell you can't get that on the Devil. That's something you can't get. I mean, you can go to Seminole Canyon State Park and hire a guide, or if you own land on the Devils, but you're not. Yeah, that legally, that's one of the few places you can do that. And I almost hate to put that out over the air, but it is. You still have to know where it is, and you still have to have a little elbow grease and moxie to get there. And with the days of the internet and whatnot, but my hope is that when people find these gems and these treasures, and it really is amazing that our Texas, allows you to access these gems like they do.
Mm-hmm.
It really is amazing. And I'm not saying anything anybody can't find out on the internet.
Yeah.
But with that privilege and with that information comes responsibility. And I would always, really, ask people to, when you access these sites and all this information we find on the internet, however you find your way to it, that you respect these waterways and these sites and these gems of Texas with the utmost respect. And I'm talking about not a cigarette butt, not a nothing, and no trace left. And that's really what it's about. That's what's got to keep it. Because I got to tell you, Joe, in almost half a century of living, I've yet to see a river where they've made more people access, and those rivers have gotten any better. That's something I haven't seen yet. Maybe I haven't lived long enough. Maybe I'll live a day when there's more people and it makes it better fishing and and more, and the scenery's better, but I've yet to see it, and that says a lot for Mother Nature, but doesn't say a lot for us. So, I ask everybody always, be vigilant and leave no trace. And these places will always be gems that everybody can enjoy, for generations.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a 5-year-old grandson. I'm going to be, I want to hike up to these spots and show all this, and I want it to be exactly like it was decades before. And I think we all owe that to each other. And also, the fact that we can do that in Texas, it's amazing to me that you can just roam like you can in Texas. It's a great state.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely. Those places do need to be protected. And luckily for now, some of them are so remote and so hidden away that only the most hardcore of the people know how to get to them. And usually those people are conservation minded. They respect the land. They're spending a lot of time to go out there and check them out and a lot of effort and all that. So most of those people understand, the need to protect those places. But
right.
In the future, like I say, who knows, but the state of Texas
who knows?
The state of Texas also does an excellent job of keeping those places protected, there has been some stories of carving on the walls and spray paint and this and that stuff just makes me sick, but
yeah, I've seen it firsthand. Unfortunately, I've seen it firsthand. But some of that stuff dated back to some of it dated back to 1965 too. So
right, yeah. Well, anyway, man, let's talk a little bit about some of the rivers. The Devils obviously is the big one. What's going on out there with the permit system and all that? It's just been this last year or the year before that they've kind of taken over.
Yeah, that's been the last few years. They're letting 12 boats. They got permits for 12 boats a day. Mm-hmm. And it's allowing, and those are, that applies when you access TP&W managed lands at any point during your journey on the Devils River. Okay. And and there's certain guidelines, and I mean, it's really more than I can run off the top of my head. But it's at the TP&W website. Definitely, if you're planning on accessing TP&W managed lands at any time during your journey on the Devils River, there's quite a coordination that has to be done there. Yeah. Obviously, hiring a guide, someone like myself or anything like that, I can help with some of that. Mm-hmm. And some of the trips I do, but we don't access TP&W managed land, so there's not some of those permits and whatnot required. Although respect for the river is exactly the same and maintained at all times. We still, it's just I try to offer something for everybody. If you want to go the permit route and do that and access the TP&W managed lands, and whatnot. And there's some legwork done, involved in that, in the phone and the system, and they're in the TP&W, they're constantly trying to protect their system and doing the best they can to supply the demand. But the river is getting more popular. And I can respect what their wishes are, what they're trying to do, and they've still got quite a bit of land, down there left to develop, and new stuff they'll be opening up. So, hopefully that I'm looking for forward to really responsible management. I've met some of the Joe Joplin and whatnot down there, and I think that these guys are passionate enough about keeping the river and its integrity intact that I think it's going to be good for the future of the river. Yeah. But time will tell. Like I said, I've been alive a long time, and I've yet to see a river where there is more access. But you know what? Maybe they can hit a home run here, and and things will be different this time around. But there's that fine management, that fine management issue, of course, you got to take into consideration the fishery. And I've seen this on the Brazos. I've seen, we've had actually, for the first time ever, I've seen fishing tournaments on the Brazos. I've never seen that before in almost 30 years on Brazos. Yeah, kayak fishing tournaments. I mean, so basically unleashing, up to 30 highly competitive kayak fishermen from one point, from point A to point B, everybody fishing the same time, same stretch of river, everything. So, and then there's the pre-fishing and whatnot. And then you have the issues of, do you have these tournaments on lakes that don't have any stocking, or on rivers, where there's no stocking program, which the Brazos has no, current stocking program, repetitive anyway. and receives no stocking support. So obviously there's going to be some mortality anytime. And for whatever reason, some of these tournaments, they chose to have them in the heat of the summer, which is August. Obviously, you're going to have some fatalities. You know, I'm sure you're familiar with kayak fishing tournaments. There's actually quite a lengthy out-of-water documentation process as far as, you know, with putting them on the board and whatnot. And there's quite a bit there. And, you know, I'm not so sure that August is the best time of year to do that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's hard on the fish, and I've seen them floating. I've seen the pre-fishing. I've seen the results of all of it. Whatnot. So I have mixed emotions about that. But, you know, once again, you know, I think that in the end of it, it's a reflection of the growth of our sport. And,
we'll see how it goes.
You know, you just kind of got to go with it. I don't like seeing floating fish anyway, but you've got to, here's what I'm saying. The growth of the sport, there's got to be some infrastructure to support it.
Right.
Yeah, the retailers are selling the kayaks. Mm-hmm. Hey, you can buy anything online. You can literally, I mean, you can build a rocket ship / kayak online, but who, with all this access and all these people and all this stuff going on, who's supporting all this? Who's all this fish, all this pressure, all this fish that haven't seen? Who's support? There's got to be some things that change, and some of these, and you know, that some of these folks are harvesting fish,
right.
And that needs to be taken into consideration. A lot of these waters that, you know, have statewide bag limits, but you know, if they have statewide bag limits, do they receive any stocking? So if they don't, do really statewide bag limits apply? Or, you know, I'd like to think you just apply common sense, but that doesn't work for some people. So then where does that madness end? It's you know, it's always at the expense of the fishery.
Yeah.
And that's the sad thing. So I'm hoping that Parks and Wildlife, I don't care if they got to raise the price of the fishing licenses or whatever, but you know, to ensure good fishing on all these bodies of water, as we've got these literally generations of people looking at getting this sport and accessing water that, you know, hasn't been accessed before, you know. And I think I think with the growth of the sport, I think the industry, it's rising on the need as far as what you want to buy. And, you know, there's a million different things you want. If you're there is so much support there. But can, you know, the waterways and our fisheries can support the added wear and tear? That'll be interesting. That'll remain to be. And I'm not talking about the coastal stuff. I'm talking about our inland waterways, and I'm not really even talking about our lakes. You know, I'm talking about specifically our rivers and streams. That's really what I'm. You know, as you know, erosion and whatnot, and things like that. You know, people going back and forth and things like that. Things I've seen and whatnot. So, you know, those are all issues that only time will tell. And so it will really be interesting to see if everything can rise to handle the growth of the sport, the infrastructure. And it looks like it has in certain areas. It remains to be seen in others, in my opinion. But I don't know. I've just got my nose to the grindstone, and we're out here fishing. So
yeah, well, there's no better voice out there than yours, man. I hope that you're keeping in contact with the people who make a lot of these decisions, and you know, like I say, nobody knows these rivers probably as good as you do, and what's going on with them. You're out there all the time. You see what's going on with everything, like you say, the erosion, the grasses, and all that. So hopefully, you know, you're keeping in touch with these people, and that they're taking an interest. The one good thing about the boost in people on these rivers, that now there's more people with a vested interest in keeping these fisheries alive and thriving. So hopefully, you know, it is a double-edged sword, but all we can do is hope for the best, and management is what it's going to come down to. A lot of it's just with hunting and fishing everywhere. You know, hunters and fishermen are the ones who keep fisheries alive, you know, and hunting areas, stuff like that. So,
right.
You know, but anyway, you know, the Devils, I think the cat's out of the bag out there, and I hope that, you know, I think Texas Parks and Wildlife and some of the guys you're talking about have seen the writing on the wall, man, and that they need to start regulating and keeping tabs on what's going on out there, man. That was one of the last gems, the last jewels is so isolated, but nowadays that doesn't matter so much. The internet, the cat's out of the bag, people are coming and they're going to keep coming. And every time one guy does it, he tells all his buddies, posts all the pictures online, which is a good thing. I mean, it's growing the sport, and it's a good thing that a lot of people are enjoying that river. It is a gem, but just hoping that what they're doing is the right thing, and I hope they know what they're doing. Obviously they do. Texas Parks and Wildlife isn't their first rodeo. They've been there, done that. So we'll see how it goes, man. Just let us know what's going on out there. Your voice is the biggest, man. You're out there more than anybody. So we'll see how that goes. Now, listen, I want to get back to the Pecos, if you don't mind. I've been really I've been really wanting to do this stretch out there. I read, I don't know if it was from you or somewhere else, but there was a 45-mile stretch. That might be more than I can handle right now, but I'd sure like to work up towards something like that. That would be awesome, man. Have you done a stretch that long recently, or?
No, on the Pecos, I really don't, because it's more about really that upper end is more about a lot more about paddling than it is fishing. Mm-hmm. But it's something I've wanted to do, and it's a trip that needs to be done. And I had an opportunity to do it in the opportunity I had to do it. The time that I didn't, thank God I didn't, because these guys got caught up, and you may have heard about it on the internet. 33-foot, 1,000-year flood. On that, they got caught on, and it wound up being a whitewater rescue. Like 3 days into a 5-day trip. Wow. So it was the river went flash flood, and it was crazy. So that's a little more exposure than I want. I'm more comfortable on the Devils than I am on that river. There's something about the high canyons and whatnot. I just I don't like the exposure on that river that I don't feel is on other rivers. I don't know what it is. I'm just not comfortable on that river. So I kind of spend my time on the lower end of it, and I've not run, from Pandale down myself. But I've had several of my clients that have. Like I said, I had an opportunity to do it, and thank God I didn't, because those guys lost everything but their lives.
Yeah,
when the river went 33 foot, went up 33 foot, So, but they've been. It's just one of those things. It is a beautiful place. The upper end of it, that's a great way to break, to get a lot of it and really be able to spend your time. And if you know where the caves are and whatnot, to really get up in there and enjoy it a little more relaxed. Yeah. You're not moving along quite so much. So, that's a little more of a laid back trip that I like to offer.
Yeah, right. From what I've read, there's some parts of that Pecos that are pretty hardcore, big boulder gardens, canyons.
Yeah, that's flat out all ported, flat out. Yeah, all-out portages and gardens and places you can really incur damage and whatnot. But, that's awesome. But,
yeah, absolutely.
I've always been more about and that's high adventure, but I've always been more about, the fishing. Uh-huh. And, and so I tend to gravitate more towards rivers and areas of rivers that are more conducive to fishing than whitewater, than whitewater running. Whitewater spices every trip. That'll spice a trip up, and I've got trips that offer that. But I've got some of my clients that don't want anything to do with any whitewater. They want they want all the good stuff and none of the. Yeah. So you got to be able to cater to everybody, and everybody needs to be able to enjoy the experience. And that's my commitment. If you're willing and able, I'll get you out there, and I'll make the trip work so you can enjoy it and get the most from the river.
Absolutely. So, I'm sure your liability skyrockets too with class 4 and class 5 rapids, I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The dynamics of a trip down, one of my lower, Devils or Pecos trips as opposed to, running the whole, the dynamics of those trips. And quite frankly, I probably turn more business than I do, on those upper, just kind of get talking to people and whatnot, because, you're looking at, 4 nights, 5 days. Right. Usually when you're running 40 or 50 miles of river, and you don't want to give any a bad situation. You want to be I want the best, situation and trip for everybody. And for some folks, it's not running the whole thing. But although I do recommend that if you are, willing and able, to run that river, and it should be run, same way with the Pecos. That's
Hello.
So,
Yeah, I lost you
you
for
there?
a second. That's all right, Shane.
Yeah, I
man,
lost you for a
with you,
second,
man.
too. That was mine.
I'm coming, man. I'm going to go to that Pecos. I'm going to do it with you, and I'm looking forward to that. And we'll have to set something up for next year. Hopefully the flows will stay. I know it got real low for a while, but sounds like should be pretty good with all the water we've been getting. So, Shane?
Absolutely.
All right. So anyway, any other rivers, man, you want to talk about? Are you doing any, the Colorado or San Saba, anything else out there that you're doing trips on right now?
I do winter trout trips on the Guadalupe, although I'm thinking with, the water we've had and everything over the spring and everything, the Brazos will probably have, we're going to have, a few more stripers in the river this year, so I'll probably stay a little bit closer to home. Obviously, the Devils is fantastic. If you can get a weather window, that's an amazing venue, for the winter. I mean, it's amazing to watch that water heat up like it does down there.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you can get sort of a warm spell down there, and I mean, you really had some incredible early season, however you want to call it, early season fishing. And, you got to remember, hey, man, that's snowbird. These people come from all over the U.S. to come down there and hang out. So
yeah, absolutely.
If you think you can't go down there, and have a good trip and get on some good fishing, you're crazy.
Yeah.
And actually, that's one of the best times of year. I love going down there early. That's why, when I run I'll run the river, at the beginning of the year, just, a few times at the beginning of the year to start the season. And that's one of the best times, when the foliage is thin, you can really see the topography.
Mm-hmm.
Really gives you an appreciation for everything, and the temperature and the climate is so mild down there. It's just an amazing place.
Cool. Sounds good. All right, let's talk a little bit about kayaks, man. What are you running these days? I know you've been an ocean kayak guy for a while. Are you still with them, or are you trying some?
Absolutely. Yeah, ocean. I don't. I personally, I'm not sponsored by anybody, so I'm obligated to use what works.
Right.
and not much else. So. That being said, a large portion of my fleets I've had is actually I've been using the ocean kayaks, Malibu 2s, Malibu 2 XLs, P13s, drifters, and then I've also got of course, Scramblers, one of the greatest surf kayaks for running baits out of all time. Also a great kid kayak on the river. That's a good kayak. Mm-hmm. I say kid kayak. I'm practically the size of the kid, not much bigger one. So, that's a kayak that's good for even me. And then, but really, what I find really is versatility-wise really good for a lot of people. The stature, weight, and otherwise is the Perception Sport Pescador kayaks in the 12-foot length. That is a kayak that has been very versatile.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I use that on day trips, overnight trips. It's it's got a decent weight on the hoof, around 53 pounds, I think. Mm-hmm. And, comes with, rod holders and pretty well, ready to fish and, camp, whatever. 3 hatch points, which give you good accessibility to below deck, which I really like, especially that what's rare to find is that hatch, that 6-inch hatch behind the seat, which is important if you ever incur scupper hole damage there, which you usually will under the seat. And then also for just being able to, that hole, give you access to the hole there. I find, I'll use a mesh laundry bag and put bottles of water or hide, freeze-dried meals or whatever and put them through there and keep them in there. I mean, that's hole space that's not being used.
Right.
So, if you can get some lightweight stuff down in there, that's great storage space. Even an air mattress, whatever. Anything you can put through that 6-inch hatch, as long as you can put a cord on it and get to it or a clip on it, pull it out of there. They're great to use. So I really like that. That's basically an old Wilderness Tarpon T12 mold. And but anyway, I've got a large portion of my fleet is those, and I use those probably more than anything else on a day-to-day basis, day in and day out. And I've also got a few of the Jacksons. The Goose has a good kayak if you've got some water moving behind you. I don't like it much in a headwind. They've all got their hey, it's like anything else, man. You pick up one thing in one area, you give it up in another.
Exactly.
I'll tell you what about that Jackson. It sure is nice to yank that sucker out.
Yeah.
That seat out of that kayak at the end of the day, and plop down next to the campfire, and then I'll tell you that, that's the seating. They've got the seating down and everything, but you have to have a wider platform for that, and there's some other things you give up. But, everything loaded certain ways, and that's another mistake that I see a lot of people look at weight capacity and thinking they got a 500-pound kayak.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to load this thing to 500 pounds, and that's one of the first things I teach people, that really, before you start drilling holes, add the weight, doing all these things, you need to realize that that's not your goal. Okay, I've got that's not your goal.
Mm-hmm.
For weight. You want to stay at about 70 pounds, 70% of that, and really, how you distribute that weight is very important. Well, to get maximum performance out of the kayak. So a lot of people don't understand that, or don't compensate for that. But they'll learn. They'll figure it out. You either learn it from somebody else, or figure it out down the road. But most of these kayaks on the market, I don't care what their weight capacities are, you need to keep them at about 70% of that,
mm-hmm.
to make sure that weight is equally loaded. If you want, decent performance out of the kayak, that's just my personal opinion. I have no idea. I don't research anything like that. I paddle some. That's my opinion,
mm-hmm.
and I'll load it down and take it to hell and back, and we'll just take it from there. I'll know everything I need to know after that.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, man, but when I showed up on the Brazos with you, I had a Jackson Kuza, brand new. I was all excited about it, and it is a good little kayak if you've got good running water, but on the longer stretches, flat water, man, it wore me out. It just was not the boat for me. But man, you can almost do a complete 180 with a one paddle stroke in that thing.
I know it would. It'll spin on a dime, won't it?
Yeah. So I've gone back to the ocean kayak, and I think I'm not going anywhere. I've got a Trident 13 that just glides beautifully. It's not as maneuverable as some boats, but it does what I want it to do, and I could load it down.
Right on.
And I love it.
Right on. What was that you had that little Stealth 11, or what was that thing you had on the Devil?
On the Devils, that was the Tetra 12.
Tetra?
I've still got that boat.
Well, was it a 12 or an 11?
It was a 12, yeah, Tetra 12. And it's got a tracking issue. I don't know if it's that mold or that boat itself, or if I'm not loading it correct, but it wants to track off to the left. I don't know if you remember me fighting it, dude, on the Devils. And if any wind at all, kind of pushed the back end around. And my wife, she's paddling it now. We went down to Llano, and she had the tracking issue with it too. I don't know if it was just that boat. I don't know. I mean, I might have it loaded wrong, but anyway, it flows real nice, but you got to paddle more on one side than the other, and it floats
right on
too. But yeah, I think I'm an ocean kayak guy. I've got no gripes with their boats. So.
Yeah, they do, and I think they're coming out with more stuff than ever. I think they're coming out with a pedal drive now.
Well, they kind of started the whole thing, I mean, they've always had a good product, and a lot of guys have copied their stuff, to make their lines. But I've got no issues with them. I think I'll stick with them. So.
Absolutely.
All right, man. What about rods and reels? What do you? I guess it all depends on what you're fishing for, but is there anything in particular that you're fishing these days, rod wise? Like what length and what weight, stuff like that, are you using?
I got to tell you, I really, the tendency for the mistake I make a lot of times is I go too light. One of the best values I've found. And I know in my business, sometimes I have to use spinning gear just to allow clients because presentation is so much of it. But at the end of the day, I find that some of these river fish are so strong that people really, and I know you were surprised even at the weight of gear that I use as far as, the heaviness and approach. Most people would think, river and ultralight and, 6 and 8 pound line. Well, fact is, on a river, you'll just get owned. And I really, I like, if I'm freewheeling in a kayak, I'm on a shallow water river. I've got hard charging fish like smallmouth and largemouth, and these fish don't fight like they do in lakes where they've got water under them. They don't. They come right back at you. Most of our fish are hooked in less than 5 foot of water, most of them in 3 foot of water or less. So they're going one way or another. So I've almost, I don't even think I own a reel with anything less than 7-to-1 gears in it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I've got some old round. I'm a diehard. I've got some old round reel Abu Garcia Pro Max 10 bearing reels that have got, or actually I think they're 8 bearing that I've converted to 10. They've got 6 7-to-1s. But now, and I mean, I really understand. It reminds me, Ron Gardner, which if the name sounds familiar, it should. He's got 7 of the top 10 spots on the Texas TPNW top 50 smallmouth all time. I was privileged enough to be a mentor of his. And guy's probably been more responsible for more 6-pound-plus smallmouth than any other man in Texas. I mean, just really a true genius. And he always, I remember, even back in the 80s, he went to early 90s, he went back to great lengths to get these. He was sponsored by Daiwa to get these Procasters with these high 7+ gear ratios in them.
Mm-hmm.
7-1-to-1, 7-3-to-1. I mean, he said that was the only thing he'd use, and that's when he was fishing at Whitney and getting these fish out of Whitney, and these fish actually had water under them. So even more so in the rivers, I'm really you've got to have high gear ratios, and really, if I could, I mean, if a man can, and bait casting gear is strong. I mean, it's really some of the best options, and Joe, I threw out my last spool of braid, 30-pound braid, because I got embarrassed. I've gone to 50-pound braid. Fish are just strong, and I mean, you can go. People just have no idea what these fish will eat, especially when they have a big water flow. And these fish are eating on bigger baits, and they've been in fast water. And, man, these fish are fat and sassy, and, man, you can go too light. I mean, you can have a lot of fun, but in the end, you'll get owned. These fish it's amazing how they will really deliberately, these river fish know how to use structure to their advantage, especially the biggest fish. They will be the most creative in breaking you off. And, in a kayak, a lot of times you've got a rubber band effect. You might be anchored up, you might not. Sometimes we got a drag chain down, sometimes you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that fish starts heading that way. Dude, there's nothing you're going to be able to do. You can sit there and paddle with one hand, do whatever you want. A big fish he'll get you in a lay down quicker. You can make any kind of adjustment.
Right.
So,
bigger the better, huh?
Yeah, really. I mean, people are surprised. But me personally, I fish with really heavy. I fish with heavier gear than most people would imagine. People are initially shocked at that. Mm-hmm. And how heavy we use on some of these fish. But now there's the days, just like any other days, when we got to go down and get, down and dirty and nasty and, get thin line, no leader, get rid of everything and, go to the finesse fight. I mean, we've all been there and done that. And, at the end of the day, it's better to, if you break those fish off, I've got a saying, hey, man, it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Yeah. So, it's one of those things, but, all the light tackle fish are always memorable. Those are always long dog fights. So when you do land on a light tackle, it's great. But, man, I'm not the kind of guy. I'm the kind of guy that if I leave a hook in a fish, at the end of the day, I'm thinking about that thing and, before I go to bed and when I wake up in the morning. So right. I'm not big on leaving hooks in fish. I want to get my fish in. I'm not, so I lean a little more towards heavier gear. And that's probably one thing that people would think was a little different. But as far as I really like reels, I like Lew's reels. Uh-huh. I think they're great value reels. Even their even the combo you get at Academy is not a bad. Like the American Hero, the 5-bearing Lew's on the 6, 10 rod. That's a decent setup, and it'll catch great fish. It's got decent gears, and it's got 7-to-1 gears in it. Mm-hmm. That's not a bad setup, and I've really liked Lew's. I've come to like the Lew's reels, and in the higher speeds and whatnot, and 5 to 10 bearing models they'll all give you good service. So
yeah,
they'll all need a little,
I just bought 3 Lew's. As a matter of fact, they're my crankbait reels, and I really like them, man, especially for the price, Any reel that's $100 or under and has got quality like that, I really, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you can get a 10 bearing reel for, under $100.
Yeah.
Or, right at.
Yeah.
That's not bad, and they're decent reels, man. I really like them. And they got to get their magnetic and centrifugal, you get those, you can really get them dialed in and throw, a variety of baits really well.
Yeah.
So.
All right, man. Let's switch gears here. Let's talk a little bit about weather, man. Obviously, this is a big issue, for river fishing, especially when you're out there for multiple days. I remember the first day on the Devils with you, man. We had a storm come through. I don't know if you remember that, but man, it ripped, and it didn't rip long, but it ripped hard. And talk to us about weather, man. What's some of the stuff you've been through? What do you do to combat that kind of stuff?
Well, obviously, there's forecasting and whatnot, tools and information that's available over the internet in regards to forecasting. You can do a lot to prevent yourself getting in that situation to begin with.
Right.
And meaning on a river, basically a flash flood, cloud to ground lightning strikes, hail, things like that. Those are your big dangers on the river. Obviously, those things as with any outdoor activity, those are always a clear and present danger. Having a good outdoor, I've always got an NOAA alert radio with me, especially down anywhere where you have the systems coming from Mexico and whatnot. That's one of the areas I found to be very inconsistent and can really surprise you as far as moisture and whatnot. I mean, I've been in hailstorms down there in February. It's crazy as heck. I mean, it's really interesting, the weather systems you can encounter there, but basically you have to be prepared for good quality gear, of course, a good cave.
Right.
I've actually with the weather the alert radio, has helped us to actually anticipate and be in a higher ground situation when those systems do come through. Now, we've been in systems that have just, we're rained from, you could see systems building in the north, and you were going to be you just had to be out of the flood, make sure you were out of the floodplain. I mean, it rained from 10 o'clock at night till 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean, you were just holding the tent down in all the corners, stacking gear, just praying that everything held together. I mean, the wind blew 40 miles one way an hour and 40 miles the other way an hour. I mean, it was like the night would never end. I mean, literally. And I'm sure anybody that's been in the outfitting business and done what I've done and been in the outdoors long enough, everybody's experienced stuff like that. But I mean, literally, or you just, hey man, spread out in the corners of your tent, put all your gear in the corners, spread out, pull your, sleeping bag up over your head, face down, and I'll see you when it's over.
Hunker down.
Yeah, I mean, that's sometimes you just gotta ride it out, And, when you got big rain events and whatnot, as long as you're out of the floodplain, but as far as flash flooding and whatnot, that's probably your biggest issue. Just staying ahead of that, and then being able to ride out whatever you get dished after that. So it's a multi-tiered process. It's not any one thing. It's a number of things that'll keep you out of harm's way. And then of course you got, all the natural hazards and everything. I mean, when you're out, scorpions, snakes, everything in the, everything's got thorns on it.
Right.
But that's all part of the experience. And, we work our way through it. And, in the past, I think, maybe a peanut allergy is probably the worst thing that's ever happened. Everything else we've been able to, work our way through.
Right.
And the peanut allergy happened the last 5 minutes of the trip. So we were like practically, it was no big deal. It wound up being a non-issue, but
lucky that.
I mean, that's the kind of stuff that everything you endure in the wild, then you have something like an allergy come up. But that's the world we live in.
Yeah. Well,
so in reality, I always tell my people, as great as our adventure sounds, and is perilous as much of it. And truthfully, really, Joe, I'm thinking of most of the venues I fish. People are probably, it's more dangerous driving to any of the venues that I fish on than it is, I don't care where it is. I mean, people are more in danger driving to believe me, a trip down any of the rivers that I fish on, you're in more danger driving to work than you are venturing out on in most Texas rivers. And that's statistically, I'd say that's a fact.
Right, I agree, yeah. The floods was actually one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about next. What do you see it do to the river system? Do you think it's naturally a good thing for it, or does it harm the fishing in any way? How does it affect the fish? I know most of them, over eons have learned to deal with it, but what are you thinking? Are you going fishing right after the floods? What are you doing there?
Well, yeah, you got the floods. You got different levels of flooding. You got flooding like we've had, let's say this week, where we've had just where it come up a little, a massive flooding, and not for days, not for weeks on end. So you got a few days where the water's come up 6 feet or so and runs a little bit and whatnot. And then you got flood events like some of our rivers have had in the last few years, including the Devils, which are basically 100-year floods. Even the Brass had 100-year, recently over the summer. Mm-hmm. Had a huge flood event that I haven't seen probably since 1991. And, the Devils right before, our trip, back in 2010 from Hurricane Alex had a 30-foot rise. When those type of floods happen, that's the stuff that relocates fish, dredges up old vegetation, makes the rivers hypoxic, and fish like smallmouth and whatnot. Some of your game fish will actually drop back and actually relocate, where a bass would spend most of its time in the river in the section that it was hatched. In other words, I've got a saying, there's an area of the fish that what I call has a big fish genetic. I mean, literally, but what can change that it will always have that. The deck gets shuffled. When you get these floods, these fish will relocate. These rivers, so much water, especially on the Devils, that such a volume so fast, the river can become hypoxic. These fish can't deal with it, and usually on a sub flood or a normal flood event, they would ride it out in an area of the river and stay in a locale, or whatnot. They just can't. They keep dropping back. They drop back. They drop back. They drop back. And that's like we found in 2011, and wound up finding a lot of big fish that dropped back, and these holes had nothing but big smallmouth. And when the water receded, and you're like, where'd these fish come from? Well, I know where they come from. I mean, they had no choice. They were big, mature fish, and they knew how to survive in the river, and they'd probably been through a flood event or two, maybe none like that. But they just drop back, and it's not unusual. I've seen that pattern on other rivers too. It's more exacerbated on those narrower hill country rivers, and when you get all the flooding out of the arroyos and the dead vegetation, it's really exacerbated. It's very much different. It's not like flooding on the Brazos or in some of these other rivers up in north central Texas. It's very different.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how I found that the smallmouths responded on the Devils when they had that 100-year flood after Hurricane Alex in 2010. That's what I saw.
That's interesting. So, what do you see? In general, as far as water levels go on the rivers that you're fishing. Are they up? Are they down? I know we just went through this massive drought.
Oh yeah, we've had an epic, right? Yeah, epic wet year, and of course, it's funny because we go from literally, an epic wet year to holding all the water up here, and then we went, like on the Brazos, then it was like epic, not epic low flows, but low flows. So it went from one extreme to the other, and which is typical, and it stressed a lot of migratory fish out, like stripers and whatnot. They're probably the hardest hit because they're auctioned. You talk about, these fish, they find their way in from the reservoirs, and, they're usually, when water gets warm or not, they can run off into, 40, 50, 60 foot in a reservoir. But, once they get in the rivers, a deep hole's 12 foot, in the Brazos, and they've still got them in all their partners. Sometimes you can get into an oxygen starve situation. Yeah. And some of these fish are suffering from that. They're younger fish, they don't, and older fish too require more oxygen. So it's good to see these floods, this round of water. It really takes the water moving through to keep these fish stabilized. So it doesn't hurt the bass much. So it's more the migratory fish like white bass, stripers. That's just bigger, so they're more affected by it.
Mm-hmm.
The water flows or lack thereof. The bass, they do fine no matter what.
Right.
I mean, they're gonna be fine unless you have a go on all out, some sort of a non-beneficial algae outbreak or something like that. They're gonna be fine.
Okay.
It's the non-native fish like the stripers and whatnot. They're the ones that tend to suffer the most. But that being said, we've got some real monsters out of the Brazos. So even this year, some fish pushing 30 pounds. So they're the big fish. They find a way to survive. They're some of the most vulnerable, but they're also some of the most hardy, in that they know exactly what to do in a low oxygen situation, or in that type of situation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I've seen in 30 years of fishing the river. Not all the fish get killed all the time from all the same things. There's the strong survive, and sometimes despite mankind and really these algae outbreaks and everything, nobody will admit it, but it's a fact. I mean, they're man produced.
Mm-hmm.
From poor farming and irrigation practices, and aged septic systems on the river and whatnot. I know exactly where it comes from.
Yeah.
I can see I can see the vegetation and whatnot and blooms in certain areas of the rivers. I can see that in different water flows. If you weren't on the river every day, you wouldn't know, but
Mm-hmm.
I can see where all this comes from. But you never hear the state say anything about it.
No.
The last thing I want to do is take on landowners.
Yeah, right.
And farmers. Who wants to pick on landowners and farmers? Nobody.
Yeah. I was just
But
about
the fact is, that's where all that comes from.
Right. I was just about to ask if anybody was doing, anything to address it, like the state, and obviously not.
They really don't. I mean, they can't take it on. They can't take it. They got so many other issues and whatnot, and barely have enough money to do what they need to do. So yeah, a lot of that goes unchecked, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But the issues were there, and it's amazing because in a lot of states that they wouldn't be. I mean, it wouldn't be allowed. Texas has some pretty liberal as far as our farming and whatnot, and our use of pesticide and whatnot. Really liberal, and while it might make for some low overheads, Mother Nature paying the price. Our rivers and waterways are paying the price, and that's the sad end of it. And all these weird out of control algae blooms and everything that never happened before. That's what all that's from, and it goes and it runs deep. I mean, it's just just basically just mismanagement of soil. And Joe, I tell you, I still don't know why it is. Every time it all starts, I see the same progression. I see people buy a piece of land on the river, and I don't know what, for whatever reason, they clean everything off of it completely, and all the foliage, all the trees, and whatnot, leave a few trees. And the trees that are there either get so girdled or damaged that they die anyway. So basically, these people are like, oh, wow, man, there's nothing left here. There's no green. Well, that's what we want by the river. So they fertilize, and they want lawns like they have at their homes, back wherever and whatnot. And, they're on a nice gentle slope. But all that runs into the river. And some of these areas in the river that are heavily populated, the most heavily populated, have some of the most reoccurring golden algae problem and non-beneficial algae blooms. That's what I see on the Brazos. You don't have issues like that on the Devils and everything that I've seen. That's one of the Devils. It's amazing. That's a very pristine waterway, but something like the Brazos, it has many more issues, and then you've got people just drawing water out of the river. Just lines of people are allowed to draw water out of the river, so you have that. Yeah, people taking water out of the river.
You're hitting on a lot of the topics that I was wanting to get at. And population, the water needs of a growing population.
The resource stays the same. Resource is exactly the same, but the demand I'm like, where does it? It's like the fish thing. It's like, okay, so where does you got to address the issue? The issue. More water. Well, there's the water. Where does the water come from? It doesn't come from anywhere. I mean, there's nobody going to make any more water.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just the more and more the stress in the waterway. I see more and more of these pumps going in, and I hear them whine, and I pointed out, I'm like, this is this, and I show them the natural spring where the water drips in, 24/7, come hell or high water. I said, but this is the lifeblood. I said, but it can't overcome. And I said, more of this. I said, where does it? There's not more coming in. I said, this is Mother Nature. This is a set supply of water coming in. This is replenished. But I said, there's more for every single pump, every single person. There's more and more strain. I said, where's the benefit? Where does Mother Nature? Where does another spring well up? Another pump goes in, but another spring doesn't well up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm like, and it just gets spread thinner and thinner and thinner until it spreads so thin, spreads so tight it breaks.
Yeah.
And that's my that should be anybody, not my concern. That should be anybody's concern.
Mm-hmm.
Really, it should. So anyway, that's kind of what I've seen, Joe.
Yeah, not just the river water, but the groundwater, well water, all that.
Absolutely.
Tapping in.
Oh yeah, water is a resource.
My grandmother lives on the Nueces River and around the Uvalde area, and it was about dried up, and it was low for 10 years. When I was a kid, we used to fish it. It was always full, but of course we have droughts, and then we've got farmers in that area pumping, and once it gets too low, then they can't pump. What do? They drill wells. Finally, it's back up, but it's a matter of keeping it back up and actually regulating. Everybody needs water, man. Thirst is first, but we gotta keep that in check, especially if it affects everything. Low water levels are a big deal. So, anyway, moving on. So, camping. Let's talk about some gear that you're using these days. Tents. You found anything? Special that you've been using lately? Any good stuff?
I got to tell you, camping. I've always approached my camping like I approached, a lot of the high altitude backpacking I did when I was a kid. Light, and I'm constantly evolving. I think when you and I went, I'd gotten that little KDAC grill and used that the first time. I mean that KDAC grill has been one of the most essential, and that thing fits in the front of a lot of kayaks with 12-inch hatches in the front, and I love that. And I can really put on a show with that thing. I can cook a surprising amount of food on it. And I got to tell you, I don't know why food is, but you know what? On a trip, food is important, and and stuff like that. So menu-wise, I'd say my menu's always evolving. And, you can say what you want. Everything can be great, but everybody's got to be fed and fed good, and that makes everything better. So a good menu is always important. Yeah, and I've also incorporated things like, there's a lot of cooler options, as far as keeping food cold these days. I'm using the Ice Mew Pro cooler now. It's a great backpacking. It's got shoulder straps. It's like a backpack style cooler. It's reasonably priced and keeps ice. I keep frozen, liters of water in there, and I can keep chickens and beef and sausage and eggs, and for a few days anyway, and not even use dry ice, just use regular ice.
Yeah.
So, things like that, there's a lot of great products out on the market these days. I find that some of the Yeti products are a little bit bulky.
Yeah.
That's why I like the Ice Mule, was just a little bit more of a compact, work better for what I do. There's NRS makes a nice day cooler that I use usually, gosh, my Alps mountaineering tents have been fantastic products. I suggest anybody uses aluminum poles. And some of these rivers, especially on the Devils, the way the wind blows and whatnot. Some of these other pole inferior pole materials. I mean, you will pay for them in the sun and in the wind and in whatnot. You can really wind up in a world of hurt. So whatever you get for gear, you want to make sure that it's quality And on tents, it's got to be aluminum poles. I've all my tents are 5 pounds or less that I take on the Devils. I don't take any tents any bigger than that. On any of my river trips, those pack down and fit real nice into the holes of most kayaks. And 5 pounds or less. I mean, that's in a lot of my kayak. I use 2-man tents that I use as 1 or 2-man tents, and those are all under 5 pounds. So you can get a lot of, with what's available today, you can get a lot of durability and whatnot out of and longevity out of what's available on the market. You don't have to spend a fortune. Just be savvy. And also, I like a good sleeping pad goes a long way, Joe. And I know that's important. Some of these bilateral, if you haven't tried them, some of these bilateral mats are really nice. Mm-hmm. I'm working with a Nemo pad right now that I upgraded from my Thermarest Pro, and I really like the lateral pads, the lateral air chambers on the sleeping pads. I think those were really. I really think that's something. I mean, there's something that everybody can get comfortable. And I know if you're going to be out on the river, a good night's sleep is important. So,
especially when it's mostly on rivers, you're talking rock. So you're gonna,
I know. Sometimes you go, on dead rock or pebble or whatnot.
You need
luxury right on. So,
right on. As far as those coolers you were talking about, I found out polar bears. I started using those, and I do the same thing with frozen waters, man. And I can keep food for a couple of days, and then when the water thaws out, then you get to drink it. You know what I mean? And I found out
exactly.
That's a good way to go for overnighters and stuff. But all right, man, let's get to the meat and potatoes. Let's talk fish. Let's start with stripers. I know you're the man on the Brazos as far as stripers. Tell us how the population's doing as far on the Brazos as far as stripers. Talk to us about in the past what it was like. Talk to us about some of your records. I know you hold a few. I'm pretty sure in that area, don't you?
Well, really, actually, that's how I started. I cut my teeth on the Brazos early in the 90s. After there was a big flood back in 89 and 90 on the Brazos that put a lot of fish in the rivers. Believe it or not, this is a controversial point. A lot of our fish, we get fish in our rivers over the gates, down, up from river. They'll come up the river from lower reservoirs. They'll come over the gates. If they open the gates enough, we can actually get mature fish that'll actually go over the gates and into the rivers below. And so that's how we get migratory fish like stripers. And there was a time back in the 90s when there was, before golden algae, there was what I call the perfect storm on the upper Brazos, which is where we target a lot, where we got some of our big 40, some of the biggest stripers ever documented in Texas, still to this day, if you look in the top 50, came from that stretch of the river. And it was unique in that it supported up to 30,000 rainbow trout a year stocked by the Texas Parks and Wildlife, and and also a very healthy population of stripers. And I've pretty much seen anywhere I've gone in the U.S. where you've got where you've got stark or rainbow trout and you've got bass. I don't care if they're striped bass, largemouth bass, or whatever. You're gonna have some big bass. And they feed heavily on them. They know that they're a high source of protein. And the Parks and Wildlife at the time was dumping 30,000 a year. So we had a rule of 40s back in the 90s. If a fish was 40 inches long and had a 40-inch girth, and it weighed 40 pounds. And we caught literally over a dozen of them, from over 46 pounds, to I think some of the ones we have on the books today, Skeet Hook's fish is 42.66. I think it's the number 10 or 11 fish in the state. I've got a 40.4 pounder on the top 50 that I think is the number 13 fish in the state. But then you got Ron Venerable's fish, which is one of the top fish in the state for a long time. I think even is still the state record. His 53 pounder from the Brazos. But that fish was right before the first of golden algae, 99, which is right before the first golden algae break. And those fish have to be in the river. They were eating all those trout, and they'd be in the river. They'd be in there for 10, 12 years. Now, golden algae, not that we have that happen anymore, but, those fish have to be in the river for 12 years, and now they stock maybe 8,000 rainbow trout a year in there. But these stripers, they've got an amazing way of getting big. You know, when we get a 40-inch fish these days, you know, they won't weigh 40 pounds. You know, they'll weigh closer, like Todd Tran's fish, the current catch-and-release state record. If you look on the books right now today, it's 42 inches, and Todd Tran has it. It's the Brazos. And, you know, that fish, it was a 42-inch fish. I mean, if it had a girth to go with it, it was caught back in June of 2009. We caught it on the upper Brazos. I mean, there's no telling. That fish, you know, what it should have been, that fish probably went 34, 35 pounds. Back in the day, that fish probably would have been, that fish would have weighed, you know, 40, closer to 45, 43 to 45 pounds.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's just, you know, that's, you know, less water flow, less stocking from the TP&W, you know, everything's getting strained, everything's less and less, you know, and in the fishery, you had to show for it. Now, you know, we get you know, and that fish has been the record for, you know, since 2009, and that's not just for rivers, that's for any water body in Texas. Somebody can catch a striper that's 42 inches long, and under this program, they can measure it. And as long as it's, you know, 42 inches or better, you know, it could, you know, if they document it properly, it could be the new record. So that tells me, the fact that that's stood since 2009 tells me there's not a lot of big stripers being caught. And the ones that are caught are usually caught by us, you know, every year, me and my client. So
yeah, I've seen some nice pictures of y'all's lately of those, man. Really nice.
Right on. And, you know, and then, of course, you know, hybrid-wise, you know, I caught back in '08, I caught one that was the 1797. It's the Brazos River record. That fish did not survive. That was not a catch-release record. It was a weight record. It actually, and the fish did not survive the catch. So, the capture process. And, you know, I mean, from a kayak, I've never even heard, I've never even heard of a striper that big, or a hybrid that big from a kayak. So, that's you know, an unofficial kayak fishing record in Texas, I'd say.
Yeah. So what are some
by any means.
What are some of the baits you're using on these stripers, man? Are you throwing artificial? Are you throwing live bait?
You know, I gotta tell you, yes, we are. You know, I get some of these fish. You know, I use a lot of the big plugs, jointed plugs. I've even got some handmade plugs, dude. I but I got some of my striper fishing etiquette from the guys on the Silverwood Striper Club. I don't know if you ever remember anything called the AC plug, but that guy that looks like that they fish back in Castaic and like Silverwood and lakes like that in Southern California. They caught all those big bass and stripers on. Well, AC plug stands for Alan. AC is Alan Cole, and I knew Alan Cole. I used to fish with the guys back on the Silverwood Striper Club back in the San Bernardino Mountains back in the 90s, back when Alan Cole was whittling these things out in his shop and trying them out at night on the lake up there on Silverwood at night. They'd shut the reservoirs down up there at dusk, and you'd have to go in on mountain bikes or foot. It could be 80 degrees during the day and drop down to 28 at night. And we'd be in there after they do the trout plants and go in there and catch big stripers, just throwing big swimming plugs from the bank. And I hung out with Ken and Del East with the Silverwood Striper Club back in the day, and they made, I've still got some of their prototype swimming E-trouts and E-shads from back then. And those baits still produce to this day. And I also came out with one of my own line of them, a line of big swimmers. But, you know, plugs like big jointed 17, 16J bombers have always produced. I've always been I've always used a lot of big live baits in a lot of my chasing and stripers when allowed. And, you know,
gizzard shad, bluegill, stuff like that.
Big gizzards, yeah, even skipjack herring, depending on the river. You know, if on the red, big skipjacks, big sunfish. It depends on the time of year. Shoot, man, most people don't really, you know, shoot, man, Ski Hook's fish is 42.66. We caught that on an 18-inch drum.
Really?
It depends on the time of year, man.
Yeah.
Big female stripers get really aggressive.
What is your favorite time of year, Shane, to fish?
Yeah, man, the females are going to have more weight on them. Obviously in the spring months when they go through their fall spawn. If we're having if we've got water moving through our rivers, they'll actually spawn. But a lot of times they'll take that egg weight and just keep it on and absorb it back into their system. So, January, February through, I've seen egg weight on fish all the way up into June.
All right. Cool. All right, man. Largemouth. So again, dude, I've seen some pigs you pulled out of the Brazos and the Devils, and let's talk a little bit about those. What are you throwing to catch those these days, and what are the populations looking like? They doing good?
Well, I got to tell you, the bass, largemouth bass, they always find they're one of your most resilient fish. Temperature-wise, everything-wise, they seem to keep chugging along. I know on the Brazos, after the flood, it seemed like there was just a ton. And this is not just me. I've heard from other anglers, the general consensus, a lot of junior fish in the mix. We're getting some of our nice fish, pushing 2 feet long, 20, 24-inch fish. We get them every now and then. Those fish, they're amazing. They can happen at any time. And truthfully, I was talking to you earlier about upgrading gear. When I'm talking to you about the lessons learned, I'm thinking about these fish we're breaking off. I know we've hooked bigger fish than we've caught. And these fish are just really, I think really the potential for an all-time huge fish is really an all-time high right now for really good fish. But, I think I'm trying to get my mind around what it's going to take to get these fish to the kayak in the areas where they lay. And, dude, I'm telling you, it would just been flat out been owned. I'm thinking scenarios just in the last 3 weeks. Big fish.
Yeah.
And the Brazos is really can kick out. Well, it's not a big producer. It kicks out some big smallmouth, and it can really. It's a great largemouth river, and it's got it's got the potential to kick out 2 foot long largemouth. They're weigh like an East Texas bass, weigh 13, 14 pounds. It's just some salt fish. So they're easy double-digit fish.
Yeah.
And so 9, 10 pound fish. And that's exciting. The river's in great shape, and I'm seeing. Every day we're getting the 20s and the 22s. We're getting some great fish, but any day expecting really to bust it open. When we get these influxes of water on, it just gets these fish. It gets these fish fired up. And what it does, it blows out a lot of the vegetation out of the river, and it gives these fish less places to be. And, they're right where they're supposed to be, and they tend to congregate in certain areas and whatnot. And, obviously they're easy to target. You got an area where you're catching 1 or 2 fish, and now you can catch 10 fish. What do you think? At the end of the day, you got a better day. That's not rocket science.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember that largemouth we saw at the Devils, man, swim out from under that ledge. That was probably the biggest bass I've ever seen. I'm sure he was over 10 pounds. He had to have been. And,
oh, yeah. Yeah. There's some definitely. Absolutely. Definitely.
He swam right up to my lure, man, and I panicked and gave it a little twitch, and he wouldn't have anything to do with that. He swam off, but that's one on
That's crazy. Yeah. I had the exact same thing happen on the Brazos the other day on a 10-inch worm, and I had thrown that thing into some slop, and this thing just appeared like a ghost out from under this weed line. And I'd thrown my worm up into some slop, and it picked up just a little bit of vegetation on it. Yeah. And it slid down there, and as soon as it fell off the weed line, she came out from under it and moved up to it and looked at it and inspected it. And I just twitched that thing, but it was just too much. Like I said, these fish, they don't like salad with their dinner.
Yeah, and then they didn't get that big being stupid, man. They know.
I know.
Yeah.
I know, it's crazy, but I love it. I love it, man. But fishing got to win sometimes. Mm-hmm. That's what keeps you mad at them.
Right.
I had a good friend of mine, one of my mentors, Chris Schaefer, and he's got the Brazos River record small. He's one of the only documented 7-pound plus smallmouth from the Brazos.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, when he wasn't doing guide trips anymore, he told me, man, I am just not as mad at those fish as I used to be.
Yeah.
And you know what, man? That's what it is. You can say, and I mean, in all due respect, you've got to be mad at those fish every day. You really do. It's what drives you. It's what makes you think and keeps you up at night and makes you find a way.
Right.
And keeps you out in the nasty, and keeps you out in nasty weather, keeps you grinding. You know, that's what, you know, and all anglers that, you know, that, especially the ones that take it to the next level, they know what I'm talking about.
Right. What are some baits, you know, as far as seasonally, what do you throw during different times of the year for largemouth? You know,
you got to remember, most of my fish are coming out of less than 5 foot of water. Most of my fish are. So I use a lot of weightless plastics. Or if I use a weight, you know, I'm talking about a 16th or an 8th. I've just found that I just don't have a, you know, weights and what. I just don't have a lot of. I use more weightless plastics than I do anything. I mean, you know, when the vegetation gets thin in the river, you know, obviously I'll get a jig bite in the dead of winter. That, you know, I'm obviously, but even then, I mean, you're talking about, you know, a quarter ounce at the most. I mean, I'm talking about light, you know, light jig heads.
But,
so,
but big baits, big jigs, right? Are we talking smaller baits as well?
You know what? I got to tell you, you know, I've seen, you know, there'll be times when I'll go, you know, the smaller route, and that is when, you know, you've got a young of the year, you know, like around June, man, you're pulling your hair out. You know, you can throw the big stuff all day. It just ain't getting it done. Because the fish, they're feeding on, they're so much small. All they're doing is swimming around with their mouth open.
Yeah.
So you got young of the year everywhere. And when you get young of the year in the river and stuff like that, then you got to, you know, there's different things you have to do. You know, I'll scale down. And dude, I mean, an 1/8-ounce jig head with a gold Aberdeen hook and a 3-inch sassy shad. I'm fished on spinning gear. I freaking hate it. But you know what? Sometimes you got to do what you got to do, and it catches. But it's crazy. You catch, you know, you're catching 20 inch plus fish. You can't argue with it, and it's a hoot on the light gear. But you know, that's not the pattern. That's not one of my favorite patterns. Yeah. But it's a pattern that'll produce. And I get on a light line. I'll get on a cold water smallie pattern on the Devils. You know, where I've got, you know, on Fire Tiger crankbaits, you know, in light line, and they won't hit anything else, and I can just slaughter. But it's all water temperature specific. Yeah. I mean, it's you know, I mean, I don't know, man. If you didn't spend the time on the water, you wouldn't know. If I had to tell anybody, whatever or not, you know, it's funny. And I remember I got crucified. It's on my internet forum. I'm not even on anymore because I got crucified. People thought I was a prick, if I can use that word on a podcast. Absolutely. But anyway, you know, they said, you know, people said, when is the best time have you found is the best time to fish? When is the best time to be? I said, you know, when I'm on the water, that's the best time.
Yeah, always, huh? Yeah.
Always, because at other time, all this mental, I hate to say it, mental masturbation and whatnot, and all this information that's available to everybody on the internet, way too much time.
Yeah.
You got keyboard commandos and all that.
Mm-hmm.
These people, their time, if I had to say one thing, all that time you're spend it on the water, it would be much better served. You will experience things and pick up on things and do things that you would never. It's just, and that's the big mistake that I see a lot of people make. The first thing they get when they get their kayak, they want to do all these, want to drill all these, they want to do all this, all that. The first thing you need to do is get out on the water.
Right.
There's no substitute for it. There never will be. And I know people hate to hear that. There's people fishermen all over the internet that don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to get out on the water if you want to make it work. Yeah. And that's a lot of success. You know what? It's not, dude, I was not born, you know, I was not raised by wolves. I was not, you know, I was not, you know, at some point I had the benefit and the opportunity, incredible amount of time on the water, and a lot of it was with people that are some of the best anglers this planet will ever know, you know, relatives and otherwise. So, you know, that's it. But you know what, man? If I could tell anybody anything, then get out and get on the water. And you know what? With kayaks and everything, there's no excuse for a person not getting out and getting out on whatever water you can get out on. Kayaks really, they take that equation. There's no excuse for it anymore.
Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons you see the growth you see in our sport. It is so accessible now, But like in anything else, there's the art, and then there's the fine arts. So sometimes we like, some of us like to dwell on the fine arts.
Yeah. Hey, so before we get off the largemouth and into smallmouth, let's talk about the rattlesnake fish, man. Tell everybody that story. I think anybody who knows you or knows of you knows that story, but for the people listening,
that was an interesting day. That was an interesting day. I was on the Upper Brazos. I was actually pre-fishing. I didn't have any clients with me, and I was on the area of the river. And actually, what was more notable to me, I actually caught in the earlier part of the day. I actually caught a 58-inch long-nosed gar. Sight casted to it, caught on straight 20-pound gear the very same day. Documented that. I told that story to Field and Stream. I told them about that. I was like, I did this on that day. They didn't care anything about that. The rattlesnake thing wound up taking off. But it was really actually a pretty amazing day. The rattlesnake situation happened later in the day when I switched to bass fishing, and it actually was in the area of the river where I've caught some big largemouth in the past with jig fishing. And it was in the heat of the afternoon, and actually this rattlesnake out of the corner of my eye, it's not unusual to see things like banded water snakes and whatnot swimming about. That's not unusual. What is unusual is, to see pit vipers sit conspicuously higher out of the water when they swim, because they hold air in their body or whatever. I don't know the exact reason they do it, but they sit conspicuously higher out of the water than other snakes do. So I've noticed that. And the first thing, when you see one in the water, usually they're trying to get out. So I'm fishing, and I see the snake, and it all of a sudden goes from going across the river to making a beeline towards me. There's no flow. There isn't fly. It's a warm part of the afternoon. It's September, like the second week of September, as I recall. And afternoon sun. And so this thing comes over, and I'm in my Malibu. I think I'm in one of the Malibu kayaks. And as a matter of fact, I know I am. I'm in a Malibu, not an XL, but just a Malibu 2. This thing starts swimming around with the back, and I'm worried about it. It's getting up to my car. I'm worried about it getting in, and I know it wants out of the water, so I'm worried about it coming up into the tank while on the back. So I kind of spin myself around, and I wound up smacking this thing a couple times with the paddle, and it stunned it, and it kind of rolled over in the water. I'm sitting there watching this thing kind of undulating, and I'm like, hey, man, that thing looks like... I'm like, shoot, man, I had guys like mold worms that don't look any better than this. I mean, this thing looks good in the water. Anyway, I wound up rigging this down this 3/4 ounce Stanley jig, and I scoop it out of the water, put it in the front of my kayak with my paddle, and just set it up there, and it just sits in the little footwell. It's about a 14-incher. It's just sitting there, and it's not really doing it. It's stunned. It's not coming around, and I'm waiting for it to come around, because what I want to do is I'm thinking I'm going to rig this thing on my jig and dead stick it around this timber. And I know there's big bass in this area of the river. So sure enough, this thing finally starts to come around. So I take my paddle, I pin its head down. This is all documented. If you look on Field and Stream, they bought the rights to the story. This is the point where I put my camera down, because I have to pin this thing's head with my paddle, and I rig it on the jig. And so I rig it on there, and I start, I had made a dozen casts, and this thing actually winds up getting hit on the fall. I'm thinking I've left the head on it so I can cast it, and so this thing's alive. I'm thinking I can dead stick this thing on the bottom, just leave it there, and this thing will float and just kind of sit there and undulate, and a bass will hit it. What I didn't know is this thing got hit on the fall. And, of course, I take a lot of heat for this, and this really isn't, and it's not my doing. I told Field and Stream, and if you look at the original story that I posted in Texas Fishing Forum, you gotta remember, I just do what I usually do. I posted my thing on Texas Fishing Forum and didn't think anything about it. This thing went viral from a post on a Texas Fishing Forum. the Texas Fishing Forum, and it went, viral after that. But I said it was a 23-inch bass. I didn't say it was 10 pounds. When Field and Stream bought the right to it, they left out the 23-inch part and just put a 10-pound bass.
Well, it looks
So
like
to this day, I take a lot of heat for that. That is not a 10 pound. Anybody can tell and look at that picture of that rattlesnake hanging out of his mouth. That's not a 10-pound bass. However, it was a 23-inch bass.
Yeah. How big do you think it was? Because if I was looking, I would think 10 pounds.
I bet that fish went 7 pounds.
Yeah.
Barely.
Anyway, it was a nice bass, man. And disclaimer: please do not try this at home, people. This man is a professional, and
well, in reality, yeah, and truly, yeah, it was one of those things. And like I said, rigging it up live was part of the. That's really, cutting the head off. It wasn't an option because I wanted to fish it, live.
Squirming.
That's part of my game plan. But in handling it. Obviously a smaller snake like that, you stand a chance of getting tagged pretty good. Most people don't know the smaller rattlers don't really control their venom output like a bigger one does. So when if they hit you, they give you everything they got. So.
Right. Well, anyway,
yeah,
that's an awesome story and an awesome picture to go along with it, man. I think anybody can look it up and find it, but
yeah, I'd like to think I'm more happy about some of my junior anglers and their state records and whatnot. I think there's better stories behind that stuff. But for whatever reason, that thing caught wind and took off. And you know what? I'll take it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so moving on to smallmouth. The first time I'd ever caught one was with you. I fished rivers all over, the Guadalupe and all over Colorado, this and that. But I've never been up to the Devils. That was obviously my first trip. And I'd never been far enough north, like the Brazos and all that, to fish at those. So I'd never caught one before. That was the first one I've ever held or ever seen. But tell us a little bit about your history with them. I know you said that you had a mentor who got you interested in them and taught you a lot about them. Talk about smallmouth for a little while, if you would.
Well, the smallmouth have always intrigued me in that they're quite the gamester, and I like as far as their fighting ability. I've always had a saying that a largemouth couldn't hold a smallmouth jog strap. And that's the truth. They really do. They outfight, outdog, outthink, outmaneuver largemouth in the majority of in any habitat that they cohabitate, they rule supreme. They can run. I've seen them run circles around. They move differently. They're more proficient night feeders. I've watched them move around bass. Well, bass are more. I've seen bass. Well, bass move into investigate. Smallmouth move into. They make a move and that's it. They're pulling the trigger. They're very efficient, very quick. I learned a lot about smallmouth, and it's funny, it had nothing to do with the rivers, really. I had the benefit of crossing paths with Ron Gardner. He was back in the 90s when they were getting all the state records were coming out of Whitney, and he was doing that at night. And I met him actually by chance. I'm not sure how, through a mutual friend, and we wound up spending some time together. And I would fish with him on his boat at night on Lake Whitney when he wouldn't have any clients. A lot of times that was in the winter, so I would fish with him in some unbelievably harsh conditions. A lot of times in the winter, and he was using fluorescent line and black lights, and catching 6 and 7 pounders. They're well documented. He's got, like I said, I think he's got 7 of the top 10 spots in the state still gobbled up. Smallmouth will probably not be duplicated. That lake had its heyday, and that's when I fished with him. And of course, you think, well, what does a smallmouth and the Lake Whitney have to do with a smallmouth down on the Brazos River or the Devil's River? Well, the genetic is the same. That's a southern impoundment smallmouth, and that's what I say about Ron. Ron was the master of the southern impoundment smallmouth. and mastering that fish. Once you master that fish, I saw that he could pattern those fish. It helped him pattern those fish because all those fish that got in the rivers, they all had one thing in common. They had that same genetic. It all started with the lake because they don't stock any fish in the rivers. And the fish that they stock in the rivers are the same ones they stock in the lakes. And vice, if they ever, so it's all, it intermingles and ties back. So a lot of what I learned from him was able to, and Chris Schaefer as well. I was able to, about smallmouth, I was able to, I put those into effect, Ron's cold water patterns, crankbait patterns. His big deal was, he fished spinnerbaits like some people would probably fish from muskies. 1 ounce Colorado heartthrob, single blade spinnerbaits. Any color you want as long as it was black and purple with some red in it. He was amazing. And a lot of those big fish, that spinnerbait bite and whatnot. And I don't even, and it's funny, my last smallmouth trip, I didn't even take a spinnerbait with me. But it doesn't matter. It's an understanding of the fish. It's not the pattern. It's not that everything has its own place, but it's the understanding of the fish and how territorial they are, and where in that setting, and also how spooky they are. You and I got a little bit of taste of that, and how we some of these places aren't even some of the biggest smallmouths. They aren't best approached on, by kayak. They're best approached by, on foot. They're snuck up on, they're like salmon, trout, and steelhead. These fish are spooky, especially, when you put them in less than 5 foot of water, so.
Yeah, and clear water on top of that, yeah.
Yeah, gin clear water, so it's a whole different, I learned a lot from them, but these fish, I look at the Whitney impoundment fish, and I think that they may be in the same gene pool, but man, those fish are they're more like the Dolly Varden and rainbows and steelhead that I used to chase as a kid more than they are like impoundment. But I had to have an understanding of those fish. You still gotta have an understanding of the fish.
Yeah, I saw one that you guys caught just a while back on the Brazos, and saw you film the release of it, and some underwater footage of the release. That fish was impressive, man. Can you remember the size of that one? How much it weighed and how long it was?
I was close to 20. If it was the one back in April of last year, fish was pushing 22 inches, and that was a big fish. And there's a good story behind that, Joe. It's funny you should ask that. Because that fish was caught on a Saturday back in April, I think the first week of April, but the Thursday before that, I had one of my regulars with me. I was on a canoe trip, and a lot of my fly fishing clients, I had fly fishing clients, if I showed up with a kayaks on my truck, they would probably drive away. They don't want anything back. They want to be in the front of a canoe, I paddle, they fish. And that's fine. And this was one of my regulars, and I told him, I said, we're in the area of the river. It's the time of the year. I said, be ready. And I actually saw this fish, dude. And I said, man, there's a fish up here. I said, it's pacing between the waves of this weed line and this lay down. And this guy, he's very well fit. He's a really good fly fisherman, one of my regulars, but he fishes all over the place, all over the United States for different species. So anyway, he's got this streamer. He's got this streamer on, and he showed me his box, and I said, I picked that one, and I said, and anyway, he winds up. Long story short, he winds up hooking up to this fish. It jumps. This guy, and this is from this play. He has his fish on. First thing he does is charges right back at the canoe and jumps. Puts a huge bunch of slack in his line. He's not a real fast guy anyway. He's reeling as fast as he can. This thing jumps right in front of him about eye level. This thing looks like a brown fender. It is freaking huge.
Yeah.
And it just, the fly just, I see the fly just falls out of its mouth.
Yeah.
and falls back there, and I look at it, and this is one of these flies. Okay, he's been up in Montana, and he's pinched the barb down on it.
Oh, yeah.
And I got onto him on this before. I said, man, you cannot use these flies on this trip. I said, don't use them. And I don't know what it is about these fly fishermen. They're just happy. If the fish jumps a couple times and they get a decent bite out of it, they're thrilled.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, screw this, dude. This is a fly fishing state record, not much less a water body record. This is huge. I said, and I told him, I said, Ken, I said, you just lost the state record on a fly. And I said, I've got a client on Saturday. And I said, it's a conventional trip. I said, we're going to come through here. I said, I'm going to catch this fish. And I said, do you remember that? Sure enough. So I go on my Saturday trips. And I've got this buddy of mine. And I've known him forever. He and I used to work together in the car business. He was my finance manager. And so we're in the canoe. Once again, he's in the front of the canoe. And I told him, I said, you need to be ready. I said, be vigilant. We're going to come up on the spot. I said, be ready. I look up there. Okay, dude, I've told him, I've given him advice, we're 50 yards away from where we're supposed to be. I look up at him. He's got his line wrapped around the rod end of his tube, and he's sitting there smoking an e-cigarette. So I immediately I said, forget it. I pull him over the side. I ditch that canoe. I pull it up on the beach. I scramble down the beach. I scramble down the shore on my knees. Within 2 casts, I'm hooked up to that fish. I wasn't going to let that. I said that fish was not going to take another. I said it was now or never, and I wasn't going to let another ill-prepared client or anybody else. You can only do so much.
Yeah, especially for one that big, that's that smart,
You can only do so much. Yeah. And I was surprised. I was amazed to even think I could get a second shot at that fish, but we did. And anyway, and Jeff's a good friend. He was right. He's the one that did the video. If you hear me say his name, Jeff. If you saw the video of that fish swimming around, I was like, thank you, Jeff, for helping me. He just wasn't ready, dude. No, he wasn't ready. You
got to be on your toes.
He just wasn't ready.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a fish, but I mean, that's dude. I mean, there hadn't been a smallmouth that big documented off that river in decades. So I mean, it was time, and that's just how I am. I would have loved Jeff to catch it, but he wasn't there. The rest of the story is nobody would have caught that fish. Mm-hmm. It would have been like a trip to the aquarium. And I got another saying. I said, guys, you'll either your rods will be bent or it'll be like a trip to the aquarium. I said, you can look at fish all day or you can catch fish all day. It's all in the approach. Yeah,
I noticed when I was out there with you, you're just blowing and going, man. Go, and that's the way it's got to be, man. If you're gonna get on these fish, you got to get on the fish. You can't just be lollygagging around, and especially when you're making up miles behind the fishing. It's a matter of moving all the time, and you're definitely really good at that. So all right, man. You got it. Let's move on to the beach. Are you been fishing the beach? Can't remember how.
That's the beach. The beach. I just can't get down there. I can't get down there enough. And I got to tell you, I love the coastal fishing. It's really when I have time to do it in this thing, that is what I love the land-based shark fishing, the beyond the breaker, fishing out of the kayaks beyond the breakers. I mean, I love doing that. But I don't. It's one of those things I don't get to do it as much as I'd like. I'd love to be down there right now, but there's so much. I'm sure there's so much fresh water running in there. I don't even know if I want to be anywhere down there now.
Yeah, we just got drenched really, really big, man. So it'll be
that's gonna screw things up. That's gonna screw things up.
Yeah, plus we've had a pretty bad red tide too. I don't know if it's blown out.
I know. I heard about that. Yeah, I heard about that.
Pretty brutal, man. But yeah, Texas is a big place, and you're pretty far north, so just for you to come down here is what, 6 or 7 hours. So I can understand.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's end on the evolution and the future of kayak fishing, man. I mean, I think you've seen the start of it, and where do you think it's going? Where do you think it's been? What do you what do you got to say about that?
Well, like I said, I think the sport I think from a retailer's end of it, I think there's so much available out there for there's so much available. Like I said, I was more concerned about the infrastructure, and to support all these people that all of a sudden, this plastic armada that is, descending on our public waterways. And it's exciting to see things, to actually do things like paddling trails and things like that. And, and obviously, with the growth of the sport, all roads eventually lead to, people like me and, Dean Thomas and, people who have just been, down on the coast, people who have been doing it forever, and that's just, those are the benefits if you've been doing it long enough. It's great because there was a long time when we were out there trying to get our name out. Now it kind of comes to us. Now the sport's kind of coming to us, and that's a nice thing. That's a real nice thing. And, and there's a lot available to people these days. I see, but you know what? I've got another thing. Here's another thing, regarding kayak fishing. Focus on the fish. There's so much available to people today. There's so much to distract them from the actual art of catching fish and actually fishing from a kayak. People think that there's, for some reason, I don't know why they think I don't know if it's a dollar amount they think they have to spend or an equipment level they think they have to meet on their whatever vessel they're fishing from or whatnot. Before they not, but once again, there's no substitute for just getting your butt and getting out there and getting on the water. And a lot of people overthink this stuff, and what they fail to realize is they'd be much better served to spending their time out on the water and figuring out their fish.
I think they think the more they spend, the easier it'll be on them at first. Like it's going to help with their learning curve or something to get the biggest, baddest, most expensive, whatever. But like I've even found out that the most expensive and the shiniest kayak's not necessarily the one that you want. Like I say, keep it simple and get a kayak that fits you, one that's smooth and you're not fighting all day, and that's going to help a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you think the future is, man? I mean, is this thing going to keep rolling along? What you think it's? Have we gotten to a pinnacle, or is this thing just going to get completely out of control?
No, not really. Because here's what I'm seeing. I don't think the sport. I hope the sport doesn't miss it, and they don't know how to handle the growth. That's what I see. I hope everything handles the growth, and that it just and that they can handle it, even in the tournament. They don't even. I mean. I'm not a tournament guy, but I mean, a lot of the talk you see and whatnot, if you put an ear to the ground, they don't even know how to handle the tournaments and the popularity of them and how to make them and whatnot. So there's still so much being figured out about the sport, and that's what's great. And as long as there's, as long as there's people that are rising to meet the challenge, and and offering, and offering people ways to get out and enjoy our sport in different venues and whatnot. I don't think it can grow. I don't think there's anything anybody can do to stop it. I really don't. I think you either get on board or you get run over. And that's kind of my thing is I want to keep it on everything on the low down, but you know what? You just can't keep everything on the low down. It's so much bigger than you or I or anything else. Yeah. I mean, it's, you know what I mean? And even, and people say, gas was $3.50 a gallon. That's why the sport. But you know what? Now gas is $1.75.
Yeah.
And guess what? The sport's stronger than ever. So you know what? It's bigger than that.
Yeah.
People say, it's because gas is so expensive. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, that's why people aren't doing it. It's not like that anymore now. And people, I mean, it's a force to be reckoned with.
Right.
I mean, it's the real deal, Holyfield. So I kind of chuckle about that. It's when people say, it's an alternative because of the, well, that's not it anymore, and it's it is more than ever. So now what's your theory?
Right. Well, Shane, I really appreciate you talking with us, man, and taking the time. We went through a lot of stuff here, a lot of really good information. And where can people get a hold of you, man? I know you got an awesome Facebook page. It's just incredible. The quality of fish and the amount of pictures you're putting up there is just awesome. Your website, anything you want to plug, man?
Absolutely, man. I appreciate it, Joe. Obviously, I've got, the Facebook, the River Run Guide, Shane Davies Guide, www.shanedaviesguide.com will get you my direction in as far as my website, and then of course we're on Facebook as well. River Run Guide Service. You can't miss us on Facebook. I keep that up the most, probably. The website, not so much, but the Facebook stuff probably has the most current on it. And then there's we've got Shane Davies Guide at gmail.com. You can email me, and then you've got also my good old fashioned cell phone 214-418-9786. And we can get you out on the river and catching the fish of your dreams, enjoying Texas rivers. That's what we're all about, and that's really my thing. I really have a passion for rivers and teaching people, about our sport and how to enjoy Texas River and get the most out of it.
Well, nobody does it better, man. I mean, I've been there. I've seen it firsthand, dude. And like I say, once again, I really appreciate you taking the time. We've almost done 2 hours, man.
Shoot, did it go that fast? You gotta be kidding me, man.
It did. It's a lot.
Golly.
And like I say, I really appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot.
Hey, no problem, brother.
All right, Shane, I'm gonna get with you on that Pecos trip, man. That's not just talk. That's definite. We need to get out there and check it out.
You'd enjoy it, man. I really think you'd like it.
Absolutely. Thanks again, brother. Appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. Hey, thank you, Joe.
Right,
anytime, man. I hope everything turns out good. Thanks, brother.
Appreciate it. So I hope everybody enjoyed the conversation with Shane. If river kayaking is something that interests you and something you'd like to check out, then you really can't find a better guy for the job. I hope everyone will look Shane up. He's a really nice guy. And I'll have some links to some of the things he's got going on, his contact info and videos and stuff like that, along with this episode at www.theoutsidewithin.squarespace.com. So check it out. You'll see all that stuff there. And stay tuned for another episode coming soon.